Well, welcome everyone to Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game. I'm your host, Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money color commentator. On today's show, a policy review could save you real money. Part one of our series on most policy reviews end in money saved with nationally recognized policy review expert, Bob Sensky. But before I start, I want to mention very briefly that Bob is also a world-class maritime artist, and I just wanted to show you a couple of his paintings. Look at that. Can you believe that's a painting and not a photograph? And this one, what an amazing attention to detail. And the last one of my favorites, JFK and Caroline. Wow. Just curious, Bob, how old was JFK in that painting?
He was 44. Wow, young age of 44, and just 3 months before he died. And the reason I think this painting, this particular one, is so appropriate, because as the father of 7-year-old twins, this to me is the poster child for staying insured.
Well, great point, Bob, because our viewers of this particular segment will appreciate what that means. In fact, the first thing they're going to ask is, why should I review a policy that was originally designed to last forever?
Great question. So you would ask, why would I review a policy, Bob, that was meant to last my entire life? Well, I'll tell you, there's a very good reason. If you own a universal or whole life insurance policy that was issued by one of the big mutual companies since before 2009, there's a 65% chance that you're on the Titanic and you wouldn't even know it. And those are industry numbers. And I'm going to show you why the Titanic is such a good analogy. If you view your original policy as one of those great fancy old ocean liners, right? And the cash value, these are the smokestacks, is the coal that you have to burn in order to get across the Atlantic. But you've got two big problems looming ahead that you can't see on your annual statement, okay? And the first one is the fact that people are living longer lives. Okay, do you know the mortality tables have been updated about 5 times since 1958? So if you haven't kept up with these price decreases and you're healthy now and anywhere from age 45 to 75, you're probably overpaying. It costs less to insure a man of 65 today than it did 25 years ago. Think about that. The second thing, big problem that you're not going to see on your annual statement is the effect of the interest rates that have been down for 10 years now, okay? What that means is that, for example, a policy that was issued in 1990 and you're making 9% on that whole life policy, for example, you haven't been making 9% the last 10 years. You've been making about 4%. And what's really scary about all this is the fact that your annual statement doesn't tell you when you're going to sink. That's really critical. In fact, that's so critical that it doesn't make this an iceberg. A more appropriate image would be Jaws. And I'm serious, because now you're in danger of having your policy lapse, and you never, ever want to do that, okay? But there's a float sticking out of the water here, and that is the policy review. We call it a snapshot. Okay? And what that has an element in it that your annual statement does not have, and that is the in-force ledger. Okay? That's going to give us the time element and see how your policy does today, moving forward, as opposed to in the past. And not only will that in-force ledger tell us about the icebergs that may be lying ahead of us, it will also tell us instantly whether or not you qualify for a refi, which is a permanent reduction in premium without compromising your coverage. I mean, if you're healthy, this is really a no-brainer. And then you can go back to being king of the world. Thanks, Steve.
That was an excellent illustration, Bob. Let's talk about, when we're talking about policy review, so many things have happened, and I'm looking at life insurance from a mortality point of view. Talk about the changes that have happened in our industry and why this could impact us purchasing or reviewing our policy.
Wow. Well, as I illustrated, with mortality extending out, which is decreasing the cost of new policies, it's going to make your old policy look very expensive. And that combined with low interest rates that have been consistent over 10 years, that's going to create more of a critical mass where your old policy is not performing up to standards. And then you even throw into that increases in COI that the carriers are imposing, and you have a perfect storm.
COI?
Cost of insurance.
Cost of insurance. Okay. Just making sure we're not all hit.
Yeah, and then you have a correlation of forces, a perfect storm, as it were, that necessitates reviewing your policy, or like the drawing showed, you could be, close to sinking.
Now, most people should do annual policy reviews, period. It doesn't matter what the policy is. But in particular, I have found in my practice that life insurance reviews on their policies seem to be the most neglected.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you review other aspects of your portfolio, your security side. Yeah, and the reason that is because life insurance is so specific, you need a specialist who just concentrates in life insurance. It's not the estate planning attorney, it's not the CPA, it's not the team leader of your estate, it's the life specialist. And oftentimes that's neglected because that's not their area of specialty, and yet they may be the owner of the policy within a trust, for example. So it's easy to get overlooked. Plus, when the original policy was sold, that's why they call it whole life, right? It's supposed to last for your whole life. Whole life and universal life are supposed to last forever. That's what the consumer thinks. So it's often, once purchased, it's often set aside and just collects dust, unfortunately.
Bob, all our consumers that are viewing our show are cost conscious about everything we spend, especially on insurance, whether it's car insurance, homeowner insurance, personal umbrella policies, and life insurance. I don't want to pay any more than I have to. I want to cover my family. I want to make sure my business associates are indemnified. I want to make sure the charities that I love go on to perpetuity, but I don't want to pay one more dime than I have to pay for life insurance. So when I'm doing a policy review and I'm coming to you, that's my end game as a consumer.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned, the correlation of forces with consistently low interest rates, mortality extending, people are living longer, and you combine that with rising cost of insurance fees, and you have to review your policy.
I think that one of the big things that we like to do on a policy review, because we've had 5 major changes, those changes in mortality have dropped the price tag.
Yes.
Some people have their policy sitting in some dust collecting safe, which I like the safe part, but it's been there and they haven't even reviewed it. There's money to be saved in this, and everybody says, Stevie, is there more money to be saved in car insurance, homeowner insurance? No. The most money to be saved on regular defensive postures like life insurance as a defensive measure is always going to be the #1 place I go to save money right away. Now, when I'm talking to you and you look at these mortality changes, the price tags have changed not only on permanent cash value, but on term, everything has changed. So we're really entering a mortality revolution, and that's why people should say, I need to look at this again and save some money.
Absolutely, because this, again, we're talking about new policy pricing, but that's what makes your old policy look old, like an old dog. And that's why you need to review it, because you can get this new pricing. And again, with mortality extending, people are living longer, and even if you have no more impediments than you had 15 years ago, you could get cheaper pricing because of the mortality change.
Now, Bob, you talked about a percentage that was really, I thought was an industry number that was really shocking. How many people have benefited as a percentage of doing a policy review?
About 65%. That's well over 50. That means over half of you now are on the Titanic, as I mentioned, and you don't even know it yet. All the more reason to review your policy.
Okay, so when I'm reviewing my policy, I might be looking at things. Sometimes people just say, well, I'll review it if I have a life event. But you're saying, no, we've already had several events, one of them being the mortality revolution and its impact. That's why you want to review today.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So when I'm looking at 65%, I mean, that means that you guys are agnostic. You're not going to care who the carrier is.
No.
And 35% will not change.
Right.
They're in a good position, or they're in a position that can't be changed. You're going to look at that.
Great point, because then you're going to get an answer, hey, stay put. You're already in good hands. So always review first before replacement.
Don't forget to watch our next segment on life events can trigger necessary changes in your policies. Part 2 of our series on most policy reviews end in money saved. And keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always check with your tax consultant, legal counsel, or financial advisor. You've been watching Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game.